So far in our unit, we have combined our like terms, we have multiplied to combine two things, we have done the power to power rule to combine two things, we've divided things. What we're doing is we're going to be taking the answers that we got before and we're going to break them apart. So we're basically working backwards. We have the answer, we're trying to find the two things that we started with. So those two things that we start with are what we call factors. So factors are numbers or variables that can be multiplied together that give you a product. So if we look at my box right down here, this little empty box right here, those are supposed to be little multiplication dots. I don't know why they turned them into boxes, but those are little multiplication dots. So factor, 2 times 3 is what gives us a product of 6. So 2 and 3 are what we would call factors, because that's what you multiply together to give you the 6. So for the 24x squared, 4x and 6x, those would be your factors. Your product is your 24x squared. For y squared minus 5y, it would be y times the y minus 5. Those are your two factors there. And then x minus 7 times x minus 8, those are your factors. Your product, also known as your answer, would be the x squared minus 15x plus 56. So your two factors multiply together gives you your product. You can sometimes have more than two factors, but for right now we're just going to be sticking with 2. So we're going to have two factors multiply to give us our product. What we're going to be looking for today is what we call the GCF. That stands for your greatest common factor. Let's add that word common in there. So your greatest common factor is the largest number and or letter combination that goes into all of your terms, whether it be 2 terms or 3 terms. And so what we're going to be doing is we're going to be using that in order to break apart our product that we have. So this time we're going to have the product. You're going to know one of your factors. So if you do your product divided by your factor, that's how we find our other factor. So that's what we're going to be working with. We're going to have our answer, divide by one of our factors to get the other one. So like 24x squared divided by 6x gives us our other factor of 4x. Y squared minus 5y, when you divide it by y minus 5, we get our y, which is our other factor. And again, you multiply your two factors to get your product. So let's practice first trying to find the greatest common factor. So for number 1, what is the largest number that would go into 4x and 4y? 4. And then do they have any letters in common? No. So our GCF would just be 4 for this one. For number 2, let's look at our letters. Or, I'm sorry, let's look at our numbers first. So we've got a 2 and a 4. What's the largest number that goes into both 2 and 4? 2. When you're dealing with letters, so we got an x to the first and x squared, your greatest common factor is always going to be whatever the smallest exponent is that's there. So our smallest exponent would be x to the first, so that's going to be part of our GCF. So our GCF there is 2x. Let's look at our third one. So GCF, the largest number that goes into 10 and 15, as Carson said, was what? 5. They both have an x squared, so is that going to be part of our GCF? Yep. And then the second term has a y, but does the first term have a y? No, so y is not going to be part of the GCF. It would just be the 5x squared. Yeah. Okay. So then for number 4, what number goes into 2 and 3? 1. Do they have any letters in common? So your GCF for this one would just be a 1. They really don't have anything in common for that one. So what we're going to be doing today is we are going to begin factoring using the greatest common factor. So what is going to happen is they're going to give you some examples. They're going to tell you the factor. So what you need to do is you need to do like what we were just doing on the first page. You got to look at your terms, see what is the largest number and or letter that's going to go into the terms that you're given. So if we look at example 1, I'm going to write off over to the side here. We have a 12x and a 24y. So what's the largest number that goes into 12 and 24? 12. Do they have any letters in common? No. So our GCF here is going to be a 12. So when we're factoring, we're going to set it up where the GCF is out in front of one set of parentheses. So my 12 is going to be out in front, and I get one set of parentheses. To figure out what's going to go inside those parentheses, I have to divide each term up here by my GCF. So I've got to divide them by 12. So my 12 cancels there, so I have just the x. 24 divided by 12 gives me 2, and then it's got the y. So that is our final answer there, 12 times x plus 2y. So let's look at number 2. What would be our GCF over here for number 2? B. So I'm going to put my B and then one set of parentheses. That's my setup for my GCF factoring. So I'm going to divide that by B, divide that by B. What's left? X plus y. So it's like our division that we were doing last time. It's just you have to write your answer in a different way. For 3, the number would be 1, but they also all have a what? An x. So what's the lowest exponent on our x?
1.
So x to the first is our GCF for this one. So I set up my x, put my parentheses after it. So then I'm going to go up here and divide everything by x. So x cubed divided by x to the first, subtract those exponents. So we get x squared. 7x squared divided by x would give us 7x. And then 5x divided by x would just give us a minus 5. So there's our final answer for that one. So in number 4, let's take a look at that one. What number goes into all three of those terms? 6. And for the p, what's the lowest exponent on our p? So it's going to be p to the third. So I set up my parentheses with my 6p to the third out in front. And I set up to divide each term by my 6p to the third. So then 6 divided by 6 would become a 1. 6 minus 3 would give us p to the third. So we got 1p to the third. 24 divided by 6. And then p to the fifth divided by p to the third. So p squared. And then 18 divided by 6. And then p to the third divided by p to the third. Cancels. So there's our final answer. So in some special cases, if your leading term is negative, you need to factor out a negative GCF. So let's look at number 5. We have a negative 42a squared b to the fourth plus 14ab to the third. Not just 14 though. My leading term here is negative. So my GCF is going to be a negative 14. And then how about for the a's? A to the what? First, because my lowest exponent there is a 1. And then b to the third. So negative 14ab to the third. Set up my parentheses. So negative 42 divided by negative 14 would be 3ab. Nope, because 4 minus 3 gives me b to the first. So then here, 14 divided by negative 14 would be negative 1, and then your a's and your b's cancel. You have to have that negative 1 there. Because if you don't have it there, when you try to multiply back through with your GCF to check, you wouldn't get your last term. So it's kind of like last time when we were doing our division. I told you have to have that 1 there at the end. You still need to have it there. So then number 6, what do you think our GCF is going to be? Ooh, our first term's negative though. So negative 3. How about for our letters? C to the what? And D to the, yes. So I'm going to set that up. And then I'm going to set up to divide. So negative 6 divided by negative 3. And then 3 minus 1 gives me c squared. My d's have the same exponent, so they cancel themselves out. So we get 2c squared as our first term in the parentheses. Negative 12 divided by negative 3. Positive 4. C to the first, d to the first. Again, subtract my exponents, I get 1s. And then 3 divided by negative 3 gives me another negative 1, and my c's and d's cancel for that last term. So we have just minus 1. So let's take a look at this challenge question for a second. This one is set up a little different from the ones we've been looking at. Does anybody think they can see what our GCF is? There's no 3 with the first one. It's not 1. It's everything in the parentheses. X plus 1 would be your GCF this time. So whenever you have 2 terms as your GCF, you have to put it in parentheses. And then when I divide by the x plus 1, those cancel. We're left with the x and then the plus 3. That would be our final answer for that one.
Well, no, because we could do the parentheses and then we have 2x